and you're very welcome to episode 81 of The Fifth Court, a podcast on legal affairs presented by myself, Peter Leonard, barrister and mediator.
Myself, Mark Tottenham, barrister and trust and estate practitioner.
Well, Mark, good to see you as always. And last week, you will recall that we brought the listeners the first of two interviews that we recorded at the recent Dublin Tech Summit. Last week, I spoke to Berlin-based Leif Nissen-Lundbeck, an AI genius, I think you can say, talking about robo-lawyers and, you know, a lot of that work that was traditional and very valuable work that lawyers did could be no more. What do you think?
Yeah, well, I think if the robo-lawyers are able to use a quill pen and parchment, then I think you'd have a little bit more respect for them.
I'm with you on the quill and the parchment, definitely. But a fascinating interview, and it is a brave new world. And we're going to bring you the second interview that we recorded at the summit. And thankfully, Mark, for this one, you turned up.
I did, exactly.
Our listeners are going to be delighted. I know people were very upset not to hear your dulcet tones on the last occasion. And we're talking to a man called Arko Ganguli, who's a fascinating character and who has set up this international technological notarizing company. Go on, Mark, you tell me more.
Well, as you say, I think he explains it probably better. It is to do with notarized documents and being able to effectively notarize things online. But I think what it kind of interested me was his background, having come from India and trained as a lawyer in India.
And he comes to Dublin to set up his company.
Dublin, exactly, yeah, having spent time in Sweden. So, I
really enjoyed talking to him. No, it's a really interesting interview, folks, so please stay with us. But first, we're going to go to three cases that you, Mark, have identified from the Decisis website. The first is an asylum case. In this case, an application had been made by a Ghanaian national for asylum based on his claim that he is gay. The IPAT questioned his credibility in this regard and refused refugee status. The applicant brought a judicial review challenging that decision. And this is the case of FBC versus the International Protection Appeals Tribunal. And it was the decision of O'Donnell J.
That's Mr. Justice Barry O'Donnell, as opposed to the Chief Justice. So, this is, as you said, it's where the applicant claimed to be gay and the IPAT questioned his credibility, and so really the question was: had they acted reasonably? Had they made an unreasonable determination?
Can I jump in there?
Yeah.
Is it that they're questioning his claim that he is gay? Are they challenging his claim that he will be persecuted because he is gay? That's the issue, isn't it?
I think it's kind of a bit of both, in the sense that he effectively said it never occurred to him to be gay while he was married, until his wife left him, and then he met somebody who...
So there's a backstory.
There's a backstory, exactly. But there doesn't seem to be any actual evidence of persecution in what had happened. If you don't mind, I'll just read out this section. It says, "I fully accept that gay men in any culture or country can never be treated as a homogeneous group or class, or that their experiences should be expected to conform to some sort of expected norm. However, in this case, the tribunal member was struck forcefully by the fact that the applicant did not appear to have had any intimation of same-sex attraction prior to him meeting L, who is obviously the other party he mentioned. As acknowledged by the tribunal member, the fact that the applicant had been married and had children in and of itself did not mean that he was not gay, particularly in a culture where gay people suffer extensive stigma and prejudice. The point made by the tribunal was that, to paraphrase, the applicant decided to try being gay when that was suggested by L. His explanation was not accompanied by any evidence of a sense or emerging realization that the applicant generally was experiencing same-sex attraction." So they clearly did look quite closely at his history.
Because in a lot of cases that can be the case. I mean, obviously, just being a gay person in certain countries is, it's very dangerous.
And I mean, I think it is worth pointing out that there is evidence in other cases of people who are effectively pretending that they have experienced same-sex attraction in order to exploit the asylum system, and the IPAT has to be aware of that.
Of course. But again, the point being that people are persecuted for being gay in a lot of countries, and that would meet the standard in certain cases. Okay, next to family law. In this case, the foster parents of a child with complex health needs sought to adopt the child. The birth mother withheld consent and an application was made to court. This is the Child and Family Agency versus the Adoption Authority of Ireland, and it's a decision of Ms. Justice Nuala Jackson.
So what happens in a lot of cases, generally speaking, traditionally, you could only adopt a child if the child was born outside of wedlock and if certain circumstances arose. Now, because where there has been long-term fostering, it is allowable under the legislation for the foster parent then to adopt. In this particular case, there was the child had a lot of health difficulties, and I think the birth mother, clearly for reasons that are outlined in the judgment, wasn't really in a position to care for the child. And so really the question was, should the foster parents be allowed to adopt? So, and that would effectively mean that the birth mother no longer has any entitlement as a mother. Very difficult decision. But in this particular case, they held that because of the needs of the child, because of the care that had been given by the foster parents, and because of the real inability of the mother to look after the child, that was the best decision for the child.
So it was in the child's interest, and that's always the primary consideration, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean,
very hard though.
I think it generally goes beyond just the interests of the child.
Yeah.
I mean,
and it should do. It should do.
Yeah,
I mean, the birth mother in this case.
Exactly.
I mean, it is very difficult. Yeah. Okay, very well explained, Mark. Okay, finally, a very interesting defamation case. In this case, an application was brought to join Google to a defamation case concerning a YouTube video. This is the case of Gilroy and another versus O'Leary, and it's a decision of Ms. Justice Hyland. Will you tell us a bit more about this one, Mark?
Yeah, so as everybody knows, I think YouTube belongs to Google. So the defamation here arose from a YouTube video that suggested that the plaintiffs had, it says here, promoted the use of miracle mineral solution as a cure for autism, cancer, and AIDS. So anyway, that seems to be the part of the claim. They sued the person who put up the YouTube video, and then they decided at a later date to join Google to the proceedings. Now, the problem is that there's a reasonably short time limit in defamation cases now. If you, generally speaking, it's 1 year, and you can sometimes make an argument for extending it to a second year. And in this case, they were well outside the second year when they brought this application to join Google as defendants. And Ms. Justice Hyland said on any reading, they had known about this video. They'd known it was on YouTube for well over 2 years, and they couldn't possibly explain. They hadn't given an adequate explanation for why they hadn't sought to join Google at an earlier stage. So
okay, so very important. There is a discretion, you're saying, that the judge has a discretion to extend the time limit.
As far as I recall, under the Defamation Act, there are grounds in which you can sue somebody during a second year, but generally speaking, you have to issue proceedings in the first year.
Okay, once you can make an arguable case, exactly, and there are sufficient or just grounds, as you say. Okay, thank you. That was really interesting. So back shortly with Arko Ganguli. Clio, the most recommended cloud-based legal software used by 150,000 lawyers worldwide. Want to streamline case management, automate tasks including your client intake process and billing, while supported by a team of people 24/5. Visit clio.com/IE.
Silence in the Fifth Court.
Okay, we are delighted to be joined in the studio at the Dublin Tech Summit by Mr. Arko Ganguli, who is a lawyer and a tech entrepreneur. And we're going to find out more about both of those things. But thank you very much, Arko, for joining us here in the studio.
Before you say a word, Mark, can you go out there and tell all those tech people to be quiet? Can you? We're trying to do a radio podcast. All these thousands of techies here, Arko. I thought that a hush would descend when we started to talk. Sorry, Mark.
Generally when a hush descends when a lawyer speaks, it's not the right precedent.
Come here, can I just say it's fabulous to be here. This is a buzz.
It is.
I know nothing about tech, but I'm really enjoying it. Really enjoying it. Sorry, Mark. Proceed, please.
So Arko, you are originally from Calcutta in West Bengal, isn't that correct?
That is absolutely correct, yes.
And so you grew up there. So is your first language Bengali then?
Yes, my first language is Bengali with a dash of English, like most Indians.
Well, your dash of English seems pretty good compared with most of ours, so very good. So having grown up there, you then crossed the country to Gujarat to study law, which I suppose is the equivalent of traveling from Dublin to probably Berlin or Poland or somewhere like that. So
yes.
Is it a culture shock to cross the country in India like that?
Most definitely. Nice to meet you. So a lot of people said,
you're a bit of a rock star, I think, Arko.
Or maybe they're all
the groupies are all banging on the window here. Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. No wonder there's a racket. Anyway, sorry. Tell us about, just give us your cultural experience in India and Mark said you studied law in Gujarat.
Yes. I think when we say India, there was a reason some time back in the day people had to come up with different names for nation states, and for India and the part of the world they said subcontinent because it's a continent in itself. So classic point. I'm a Bengali. I am extremely passionate about poetry and my other cultural things like singing and dancing. That's masculinity. And more importantly, I like my meat, right?
Okay.
And I go to Gujarat, and at the city, I go to the capital, and there are like 4 places you can get non-vegetarian food. I didn't even know that was a category because everything I used to eat, I consume was not vegan, to put it lightly.
So culturally, Rabindranath Tagore, I think, is from Calcutta. Is that correct?
Rabindranath Tagore is from Calcutta. Rabindranath Tagore is actually from Bengal because Rabindranath Tagore is the poet laureate of both India and Bangladesh.
Okay.
And incidentally, he also wrote the national anthem of Sri Lanka. He aided someone, but he's the only person who is credited with 3 national anthems. And he has a statue in St. Stephen's Green, which I came across completely by accident.
Correct. Yeah.
In our St. Stephen's Green?
Yes.
How did that come about?
I don't know. I just went there and I was like, this guy is bearded and he looks like very respectful.
Okay,
We
answers on a
respect
postcard.
the-
Yeah, no, we'd love to find that out. Okay, what's the guy's name again? Sorry.
Rabindranath Tagore.
Okay.
He was the first Nobel laureate from the subcontinent also, I think, of Indian descent.
Okay,
He got the Nobel laureate for literature.
okay, very good. Okay,
And then
very
by
good.
contrast, Mohandas Gandhi, another well-known lawyer and well-known for other things, is from Gujarat. Isn't that right?
Incidentally, yes. And Gujaratis are also like extremely rich and history of culture and have their own complete, they're all united in our collective struggles back in the day, but we are culturally very diverse and beautiful in that way.
So you studied law in the University of Gujarat, and the law you studied, was it the federal law of India, or did you have to study the state law of Gujarat as well?
I think from a frame of reference for a large country with a lot of states and provinces, we look at the US, and the US has federal law and state laws. India is not far from that. India has state laws and central laws, but I know it's a legal podcast. I don't want to go too much into legal stuff here, but to put it simply, the central legislations are more overreaching and all encompassing. In India, for example, the doctrine of repugnancy applies, where in case there is a conflict between the state laws and the central laws will prevail. I think the federation or the doctrine of federal structure of the government is more pronounced in the United States. So everyone studies law in India is like the national law, and the state law is just it's nothing new. It's not a new chapter.
It's like a kind of offshoot of...
That's correct,
Okay.
yes.
Okay, and can I just ask you, just in relation to India, I mean, India has now become the world's most populous country. It is obviously by definition then the most populous democracy, and it is a democracy, isn't it? I mean, there's a general election took place there recently.
It's still going on.
It has been run over a number of weeks, isn't it? Absolutely.
Yes.
And just in terms of administration and law as it applies in India, how do you administer such a vast country?
I think there are no right answers to any kind of a social experiment, especially as diverse as India. Like if India was not India and it was smaller nations, it would be completely fine. India is like half Europe, at least by landmass, and so it's very diverse. I think the biggest problem here is to create an administrative setup. You still have to find some cultural truths to coalesce so that people can have a sense of belonging. So if you look at the Irish example, right? So we have a democratic system here in Ireland, but there has to be a coalescing factor of what is Irish culture representing. It's like a deeper conversation, but from an administrative standpoint, the way it works fundamentally is like if you have elections at the state level as well as the central level, but also in the domestic level, in the municipal level. So there is high level of decentralization of administrative duties, albeit comes with it a sense of inefficiencies, which is why it's infrastructure growth in India is something that's always a matter of concern because it doesn't, keep the pace of rest of the Asian economies that are coming up. But it's like at the same time, the cost of not having a buy-in from different sections of society is much higher. So, but I'm not saying that's the absolutely perfect way. No system is, but the way it works administratively is like it's absolute democratization. To give an example, if I'm in Calcutta has its own municipality that ensures the roads are clean. The state government of West Bengal has the law and order where they ensure the police function well in Calcutta. while the central government will come in case there is a war and the army has to intervene because Calcutta is at the border. I'm not saying we are going to war. I'm just saying
Yes.
that it can function.
So that's it. Okay, fair enough.
So you having studied in Gujarat, you then moved again south to Mumbai, which is probably is it the largest city in India? Certainly, it feels like it.
It's funny because I think probably New Delhi is the largest city in India because New Delhi has been around there for longer, and also unlike Bombay, it is not barred by sea. So Bombay was started it was originally a. Did you know about how the story of Bombay and how it came about?
No, please tell us.
So it was originally called Hispaniola. It was the 7 islands of Hispaniola that was actually a Portuguese town. They set up this, and one of the towns was actually Colaba, which they created a causeway later on. And it was given as a gift to the British because of a royal marriage where Catherine of Braganza married the King of England. And you can gift lands back in the day. It was fun.
Well, it certainly beats the kind of ceramic bowls that I think we got thrown away.
Ironing boards.
Yes. Oh, they're more functional.
Absolutely.
So you trained as a lawyer, and you're now working in the tech sector. But when you started off work, were you intending to stay in the law?
I was always confused, and I think to a certain degree, I'm always going to be confused on what I'm doing.
Yeah, like many.
So although I philosophize and say don't be all that, but probably practically I shouldn't be this confused. But I come from a family of engineers. Whenever I tell my father was from IIT, and everyone knows IIT from India, that's the place where the techies came from. I decided not to go there and can understand from a middle-income Asian household how much support I got when I made those decisions at a young age. But I wanted to probably have this thing in me to always do things differently, so I went into law. I don't come from a legal family, but it's different. Like when you're mentioning the University of Gujarat, for example, right? We actually have a national exam for law, and there are like 10 to 12 universities. And as you mentioned, it's the most populous nation on earth right now. And even if it's a simple exam, by sheer volumes of people giving, it becomes the most competitive exams out there. So it was not easy to get into it, but I went into law. I trained as a lawyer, and then I started working in Bombay as a corporate lawyer. I did go do a lot of different things in my core legal career, but at that point, I was probably not planning to start a company in Ireland, to be honest.
Yeah. Okay. But you obviously did get into the tech side of law reasonably quickly. Is that right?
I would say it's like I was in Bombay, and most of the business that came to India, at least even till today, is a significant portion of the economy is run by technology services.
Yeah.
So by function, being a lawyer, I started as a VC lawyer. Most of the activity that I was doing, albeit was more on core finance. The people I was interacting with was more into probably the next emerging cool thing that's going to change the world in the field of technology. And I also come from a family of engineers, so I think I was primed to make decisions that are not.
There's always a bit of tech lurking in the background there,
Yes.
Arko. Absolutely. Okay, well, can we bring you on? You went to Sweden for a little while, didn't you? You worked in Sweden as a lawyer, I presume.
Yes.
Okay, and then you came to Ireland and you've set up this business called Legitify.
That's correct.
Okay, will you just give us a little potted history of Legitify?
Legitify, I read the graphic novel, I couldn't find it there, but it was definitely the movie in V for Vendetta. There is no coincidence, but the illusion of coincidence. But it was completely serendipitous. I had gone to Sweden, and I was planning to come back from Sweden, but I joined the Antler program there. Fundamentally, there was...
Sorry, what is the Antler program?
So Antler is an incubation program there for starting new companies, or just honestly, most of the people join there. So their programs, they bring intelligent and versatile people from different disciplines together to figure out if they want to start something anew. And if whatever ideas they pitch are liked by the investment committee of Antler, they invest in the companies, right? So when I joined it, to be perfectly honest, I was like just wanting to meet interesting people, such as Dublin Tech Summit, an amazing place to meet interesting people. So that was one of the primary drivers I had. But then COVID had hit, and Sweden was very difficult to get out of, especially due to legal processes. And I met my co-founder Aida there, and I was not a trained solicitor for Sweden, but I was a lawyer amongst a group of tech people, finance people. So I was, for that group, the most knowledgeable person in law. But I'm just giving that caveat. I was not that knowledgeable. So she used to ask me, I have to do this and I have to go there. I can't go there. And she was originally from the US and she could not get documents done, notarized. So one of the instances she wanted to notarize a document back in somewhere in Southern Europe. And she was like, in the US, we had this solution where we could do this online. You're a lawyer, you must have used it. And I'm like, I have used certain solutions for different legal processes, but I don't know if there is something exists for notarization in Europe. So I started investigating the law. First, I didn't find any commercial solutions. So I started investigating why. So started investigating laws. And then I went back to it and like, you know what? I probably won't get your documents notarized, but we can start a company together. And that's how
That was it. Okay. And look, will you just explain to our listeners, what is notarization?
Yes.
We had a famous case on, Mark discusses cases at the start of our show. We had one about a fellow who was the notary public for Cork, and he wanted to also do his work and provide his services in Dublin, and whether he could be allowed to do that. But to notarize documents, will you explain to our listeners who are not legal people, what is notarizing documents?
Yeah, so there are three things. So basically, first things first, before we go to notarization, we probably need to understand what a notary is. A notary is a word that is having different meanings in different countries. But for the context of this discussion, we are talking of a notary public, who is a government, if not hired, but at least appointed and certified and licensed practitioner who has been provided certain duties to identify and verify people and documents and transactions. So primarily, if you look at notarization as a process for the common people, you may need to notarize a document for, let's say, if you're opening a bank account, sometimes you need to notarize a power of attorney when you're giving someone authorization to act on your behalf. There are various other use cases. So basically, this is the person who comes in and identifies that this particular action or by this person is correct action validated by a government appointed practitioner.
It's something more than being a commissioner for oaths, isn't it? It's not just taking an oath for an affidavit. It's somebody who actually authenticates a document and says this is a true copy of a document. Is that
yes? So that's now I'm coming to the legal side of things, right? So because when I see those things too, the common person will be like, okay, they all sound the same.
Yeah.
So there are three distinct actions that a notary public generally does in the context of common law countries and also certain civil law countries in Europe. So the first thing that they do is exactly that, verify and authenticate identities and signatures to witness these documents, which is kind of similar but not quite similar to what a commissioner oath does. But it also goes forward, as you correctly mentioned, to identify the true copy of an original document to be used in certain legal processes. And also in certain distinct instances, they can also go on to certify a particular content to be true if the notary has the capacity to verify them. So we have seen that as well. So three distinct instances where you verify the authenticity of a document, verify the authenticity of an identity of a person, and in certain cases, verify the authenticity of the content of that document.
Okay. And so brilliantly explained, Arko. Really, really good. And obviously that's the experience that people would have in Ireland. But obviously internationally, documents, and there's probably a greater need for that. You know, between jurisdictions, people will see certain documentation, whether that can be verified, etc. So international notarization is particularly important. And that's your little niche, isn't it?
That's absolutely correct. I see you've done research.
A little bit.
Yes. So our primary niche, as you correctly pointed out, is cross-border notarization. What we identify, like initially we started off, we thought it will be the harder problem to solve because when it comes to international laws, there are not many international laws. They are just a bunch of domestic laws of different countries and you're trying to figure your way around it. So I must be brutally honest about my personal experience of studying public international law and private international law, not my favorite subjects. But fundamentally what we found out was when it comes to specifically interoperability or identification and processes for which you use documents internationally, you do have certain treaties and conventions which have been entered into by governments specifically to make things work. Because legally speaking, if you try to identify somebody under one country and then use it in another country, it is a legal quagmire that will not let the transaction happen. And the entire purpose of a law is defeated if it doesn't let things move forward.
Of course, absolutely. And just let's go back to the starting block. Okay, when you and your tech buddies in Stockholm or in Sweden or wherever you were, and you, as you said, you were the most lawyer type of all those people gathered. When they needed notarization, will you give us a practical example of what they would have required? What sort of international communication or international transaction they would need verified? Can you just give us a practical example of that?
Most definitely. But I didn't want to finish my previous point.
Sorry, excuse me. Yeah.
So after that,
Yes, of course, no problem.
Here's a good segue to the practical example. Is that there is a specific convention that I wanted to point out, was the Hague Convention of Public Documents, or Apostille Convention. So under the Apostille Convention, documents notarized in one jurisdiction and apostilled in that jurisdiction can be used in all the other contracting states of that convention. So also there are certain conventions in the European Union which allow interoperability of certain public documents, and those public documents include notarial acts. So so what I'm trying to say is, in certain countries, certain documents can be notarized and certified to be used in other countries, and these kind of have the effect of going, if I may say so, just like European Union legislations go over and above the domestic restrictions to activities, just to make things work, not to sidestep any regulation, because people have to do this transaction internationally. You have to have a commonality of things.
Yes.
A practical example for that is, I'll use the example of what AIDA had to do. AIDA had to give a power of attorney to somebody in Albania for something to do with a bank. Because she could not go to the bank because it was COVID. Nobody could go anywhere. For that, she needed to go to a notary public in Sweden, a notarius publicus, as they call it in Sweden. And she had to present herself and for the power of attorney to be to sign it and notarize it. Then she had to get it apostilled and sent across to the relevant person in Albania. To actually go to the bank and go do all those functions. So that's a practical example. Let's say you have money stuck in somewhere and, there is a pandemic happening.
Yeah.
I know it's outlandish, but probably in 2019.
Yes. Yeah. Well, at the time, but I mean, you can. So you've developed this business. You came to Ireland. Will you tell me how you came to Ireland and set it up in Ireland then?
Okay. So Ireland, I would say, like that way. I'm at some of those moments. So we made a conscious decision to set up a company in Ireland. Fundamentally for two reasons. We're trying to find a place where both Aida and I are native speakers of English, I would say, real way. But that was how we started this conversation. We thought a path of least resistance to just start to a place where people speak English so that we can actively speak and connect with people. And both of us are extremely expressive and talkative people, as you must have guessed by now.
Absolutely.
So that was one. But more importantly, Ireland is a very unique destination for international transactions. It is a very popular place for headquarters of various large corporations. It has its strong connections to the UK while maintaining its connections to the European Union. And it has a very strong connection to the US as well, and is a focal point where a lot of cross-border transactions are being carried out. And the kind of focus we had from the beginning was in B2B. Although anybody can use a solution, no matter what their use case, our primary go-to-market is focused on businesses and their notarization needs. So Ireland was a very strategic decision for us to open. That being said, we were surprised to find the extremely helpful and amazing ecosystem in Ireland to entrepreneurship and startups.
And had you been in Ireland before this? Like,
never.
Just literally land with your bag, your suitcase, and this wonderful idea.
And a dream.
And a dream, absolutely. Wow.
Yes. And funny enough, the first time I came here, I lost one of my baggage.
Okay, well,
just a
things have improved since then.
So
Okay.
can I then ask you, in terms of the products that Legitify is producing, when you talk about AIDA having to go to an apostille or a notary public in Sweden to produce the document for Albania, can you, as a notary public in Ireland, carry out the function of the notary public in Sweden remotely? Is that what you're producing, or is that a leap too far?
Specific to that question, a notary public from Ireland carrying out the functions of a notary public in Sweden would probably be a leap too far. That being said, there are certain specific transactions that notaries can identify, in my opinion, personally, more effectively remotely, let's say identities of people. That being said, there are certain types of transactions that are definitely lower risk for identification. It's just a convenience thing. So maybe a power of attorney for a banking function is a very, very critical action, or conveyancing remotely is a very critical function. But let's say you need to probably send a certified company incorporation document to an authority in Dubai to show that this company exists as a matter of compliance in Ireland. Anybody can check the CRO and say this company exists, and the directors cannot be directors under the CRO without getting properly identified anyways. So for the notaries can just check on the CRO and then go like, this seems to be correct, right? And for that, having an in-person meeting seems to be like, it's a great tool. Canons are great tools, but probably not to fight rats. So I feel there are certain specific actions to start off with where notaries are more comfortable doing notarizations remotely. Actually, when it comes to what notaries can or cannot do, that is a function of domestic law. Especially in common law countries, there is less codification of the notarial functions. But that being said, there are clear push towards certain practices that wasn't there before, like electronic notarization. The UK has become a major inflection point, in our opinion. COVID-19 as well.
And are we fit for purpose here in Ireland in terms of our notary setup? I mean, I don't know a lot about it. Maybe I should know more than I do. I know every now and again people say to me, "Oh, can you recommend a notary to me because I need to get some document notarized?" And I know a few solicitors that are notary publics, so I say, "Oh, I should give him a ring." And it all seems a bit ad hoc, you know. And when I'm talking to you now, Arko, like we're talking about serious international transactions, etc. Are we set up for that sort of stuff here?
I would say we have to be set up because there is no other way, right? So it's like Ireland is an international destination. We are in Dublin Tech Summit. People from all over the world are here of different demographies, different cultures, different economies. And Ireland is gearing towards to be the next, I wouldn't say next, it's already there, but even further from where it has come to as a financial hub and an innovation hub. So it's like, and the only way forward is to simplify doing transactions with people from outside Ireland, people and entities outside Ireland. So I don't think there is an optionality of being ready or not. But that being said, specific to, I want to just touch upon one thing that I wanted to touch upon when it comes to regulations and technology. There are two distinct things here. One is remote notarization, where you carry out the documents remotely. And the second thing is digital notarization, which is electronic versions of documents executed in a notarial process. And two of them have very different security specifications, specific in various parts of Europe, including by extension Ireland. There is a regulation called E81 regulations that I'm sure you've talked in other contexts as well. Specific to notarial function, qualified electronic signatures are the way going forward if you want to electronically notarize documents. The problem is, as much as EU codifies most stuff, Ireland has a stronger bent towards common law. So there is I would say a lack of clear codification, but I think we are set up for this in progression. Like we can't do everything right now absolutely remotely, but you start somewhere and you move towards digital adoption.
Now, can I just go back to your product in Legitify? If I were a notary public in Dublin, when would I need to use the Legitify product? What can you do to assist my work?
Yes. So if I am a notary public in Legitify, the notary public can do two things, right? We have clear specific categories within our solution that allow companies and individuals to notarize documents. First things first, you can definitely see a lot of businesses coming to us for corporate identification.
Okay.
Those are the kind of businesses that, again, just to clarify, we are having a functionality for marketplace. On one side, there is the notary, and the other side is the customer. The use cases which are allowed are specifically corporate documents, certain kinds of director identification, which have been pre-vetted by corporate, and like very lower risk, low and kind of I would say mundane, but more administrative kind of notarial functions, which we are primarily focused on. This is a big issue. One of our marquee customers in the banking sector, they have problems because they can't onboard customers because of certain corporate identification processes that we are followed by their KYC and AML team. So notaries on our solution actually provide this service to them. Just for reference, for notaries, it's completely free to use. They use it, they learn it, and it's just another a supply. I would say a channel for them to get additional customers.
Okay.
And they have free to pick or choose or deny notarization services on the solution. Exactly the way it works in the real world.
Okay. So unfortunately, we've been given the sign to wind this up.
But I just one further question. We had a chat on the way in, Arko, and I see you get on very well with Enterprise Ireland. They're big supporters, and they're giving you plenty of grants, which is wonderful. So where are you going to go with this? What's the ambition? We talk to you in 10 years' time. Where are we going to be?
In 10 years' time, we feel that all these processes, and we are going beyond notarization here, all third-party verification and processes, all kinds of documentation processes are going digital, right?
Okay.
But we're talking about AI a lot here, and in my event, I was talking about it. AI cannot replace human beings because everybody needs the lawyer to be there. Everyone needs the doctor to be there to tell them the AI is fine.
Okay, that's very, very reassuring, Mark, isn't it?
Yeah,
you're still relevant, Mark. You're still relevant.
Exactly.
I still need you. Arko, can we thank you so much for...
But we do have our final question.
Oh, final question, of course.
We have to ask all of our guests. Have you a book or a film that you'd like to recommend to our listeners? It doesn't have to be a legal book, so just something that they might benefit from reading or seeing.
Okay, so when it's a book or movie, I'll definitely go to a movie because of the way it is. Sure. But I'm an avid reader as well. But if I go to a movie, today I was talking about AI, and then I realized a movie I would recommend is Judgment at Nuremberg.
Oh yeah.
Because it talks about how being logical isn't being right. So AI can logically prove this world has no purpose to exist. Sure. So the sentience and ethical AI, I think, in law and in policy, I think a good movie would be Judgment at Nuremberg.
Judgment Nuremberg, fantastic. Arko Ganguli, thank you very much for joining us here in the Fifth Court.
Thank you so much, Mark and Peter, for having me here.
The Fifth Court will adjourn until next week.
So that's all from this edition of The Fifth Court. We hope you have enjoyed it. Can I say a huge thank you to Arko Ganguli? Mark, we really enjoyed that interview, didn't we?
Yeah, I did a lot. Well, particularly his Indian background and that kind of thing. And then this notarizing technology.
It's super. A fella coming to Ireland and setting up a business. It's kind of nice. It's really good. And we wish him well. He's such an impressive person. No, really, really great interview. So anyway, before we go, I would like to say a big thank you to our producer, Conal O'Moroyne, and to Alison O'Dwyer of the Dublin South Podcast Studios for her wonderful work in recording this show. Thank you, Alison. So for me, Peter Leonard.
Myself, Mark Tottenham.
Thank you for listening, and we'll see you soon in the Fifth Court.